We're at recording, so please begin. I'm going to go ahead and, if you want to, I'm going to mute my audio if you'll do that. And also I'll take the webcam off, so that, sometimes slows down the bandwidth. So I want to make sure that we have a good copy of your presentation. So
excellent. And everybody can see it right now?
Yep.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you everybody for making time this morning. I know we're all busy. I am Sasha VanDerzee, and my research study was on the relationship between sense of virtual community and work-family conflict in working parents. So just to jump right in.
Can you go ahead and, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. If you can go ahead and make it so you can increase so we're seeing your screen. If you want to go ahead and put it in presentation mode, and then we can go from there.
Let's see. So you are not seeing?
We're seeing your screen, but it's still in, it was kind of in the,
the relationship between sense of virtual community and work-family conflict in working parents. As a working parent who thinks a lot about work-family conflict, and as a scholar practitioner, it made a lot of sense for me kind of look more into if my own ability to connect with people on social media was relating to my work-family conflict. And so that's what kind of got me started in this vein. So my research itself describes the organizational and personal problems surrounding high work-family conflict, looks at social media use by both organizations and employees, and builds the body of knowledge relating to those two topics. And my goal was to understand the relationship between them better, ideally so that once that relationship was understood, it could be used by organizations both large and small. And my hypothesis was that it would be able to develop and implement virtual communities. We'll see how that pans out as we go into my data. This is a definition of key terms. I'm not going to go into all of them, but I thought it was important for you to just have at the forefront of your mind that I'm talking about work-family conflict as the demands of, when the demands of work interfere with effective participation in the family role and vice versa. And that sense of virtual community is identified as the members' feeling of membership, identity, belonging, and attachment to a group that interacts primarily through electronic communication. Obviously, this is becoming a more important construct as the increase in social media and technology usage happens as we continue in the 21st century. The theoretical framework for this study was Sue Campbell-Clark's work-family border theory, which is a theory that explains how individuals manage and negotiate the work and family spheres and the borders between them. So I used her theory as kind of a guiding point of the creation of the research hypotheses, primarily her description of like 6 societal changes that have created an increase in investigation between work and home domains, including increase in divorce rates, increase of women in the workforce, increase in part-time work options, greater mobility for workers, and increase in quality of life outside of work by workers, and an increase in fathers' participation in the home. So I used those when I was coming up with my my research questions and then the hypotheses that surrounded them. Here are those research questions. So I'm going to read the questions and not necessarily the hypotheses, but you can read those. Research question 1 is sense of virtual community related to work-family conflict levels in working parents. Questions 2 and 3 were related in that question 2 looked at what demographic variables are statistically significant determinants of work-family conflict in working parents, and question 3 was the same except looking at if it was a determinant of sense of virtual community. Questions 4 and 5 are also similar, when participants are grouped by demographic variables, are there significant in-group differences found with respect to work-family conflict and then with respect to sense of virtual community? The methodology of the study was quantitative, non-experimental, correlational. It was survey-based, and it was a convenience volunteer sample drawn from working parents who currently use social media. And research question 1, the data was analyzed using the Pearson's correlation coefficient. Questions 2 and 3 used multiple regression analysis, and questions 4 and 5 used ANOVA. So a little bit about how I have collected my data. It was collected using a 3-part survey and posted on Facebook and Nextdoor. There was 18 questions about sense of virtual community, 18 questions about work and family conflict, and then 10 demographic questions that were asked. It was posted on both Facebook and Nextdoor, which is an online, a location-based online community. So there was about 5,000 people in my location, and everybody was asked to share it when they saw it. The Facebook post was shared over 100 times all across the US, and the Nextdoor post was also shared, but it's harder to figure out on that site how often it was shared. The posts were active from January 17th to February 1st of this year and resulted in 459 participants. So 459 people began the survey, and when all the data was cleaned, 266 were used in the analysis. People who did not complete the study or did not fit the target demographics of being a working parent of a child under 18 at home who also uses, the parent who uses social media, they were removed. So my sample of 266 people were, the majority of them were 30 to 49 years old, married females, working full-time, holding a graduate degree. Most commonly, they had 2 young children under the age of 12 at home, and they lived in New England, and they had an annual household income of over $100,000. So in general, I got people to volunteer to complete the study that looked and act and have very similar demographics to myself, even though I tried hard to kind of push the survey to people of all different socioeconomic and location-based. Didn't seem to work as well as I had hoped. I used 2 surveys that had already been created. The Carlson Work-Family Conflict Scale that was created in 2000, and the Blanchard's Sense of Virtual Community Scale, which was in 2007. And so both of them I looked to use the Cronbach's alpha to measure internal consistency. Typically scores above 0.7 indicate good internal consistency, and both of mine were well above that in the 0.883 and 0.882 range. So I determined that they had internal consistency and could be used. The results I had found could be used. Unfortunately, the Pearson's correlation coefficient that I found of negative 0.018 indicated that there was not a statistically significant relationship between the work-family conflict scales and the sense of virtual community in the population that I was studying. At the same time, not on the slide, but additional analysis was performed to determine if either of the 2 subset scales of work and family conflict, which were work family interfering with work and work interfering with family, were found to have a correlation with sense of virtual community, and neither of them did. The R value was negative 0.022 for work interfering with family and was negative 0.009 for family interfering with work. So neither of those were found to have a relationship, significant relationship. In terms of research questions 2 and 3, where multiple regression was used to determine the predictive ability of specific demographic variables, overall, the selected variables were not good predictors of work-family conflict or a sense of virtual community. The adjusted R-squared was low, was 0.037 and 0.081, so it only accounted for 8% and almost 4% respectively of the variable, the variability of the dependent variable. Oh, that's how much to explain. So obviously it's not a good predictor. But when I looked at each one of the items that each one of the predictor items, work-family conflict, only work status was a statistically significant predictor. And with sense of virtual community, only age was a statistically significant predictor. And just to give the information, so all of the assumptions related to multiple regression analysis were satisfied for the data set. So I did look at all those assumptions before I began. And then there's a lot of information here, but in the ANOVA testing, the assumptions related to ANOVA were satisfied for work-family conflict, which is on the left-hand side of your screen. But in both work-family conflict and sense of virtual community, 2 variables, which were gender and work status, only had 2 groups, which made ANOVA not the appropriate test to use, and t-testing was used for those, and you'd see both of those t-testings in the middle. That was gender and work status. When I originally created the survey, both of those variables had multiple. You're not seeing these slides. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's like stuck on significance. It was stuck on slide 2.
Oh my goodness gracious. Thanks for letting me know.
You know, and again, I think you, Brian, I think you sent this out to me, but I just, so you know, because you're like referring to on the left, and I'm.
Yeah, sorry.
We can't.
You can't see that.
Yeah, I just sent her a message to indicate that, so we were on the same page.
All right, sorry. You were on a roll.
I'm on a roll.
That's good. You were like in the space, so.
Hold on. Let's try and. So what do you see now?
We're good. Data collection.
All right, so let's.
Yep, there we go. Stay right there. That's where you are.
All right, great. And so the assumptions were met for the work-family conflict. Both work-family conflict and sense of virtual community, I needed to use t-testing for those 2 variables of gender and work status. So when you look at the results for research question 4, looking at work-family conflict, and if there was any significance in group differences, the only thing that had a significant in group differences that was significant was work status. And then when I looked at sense of virtual community for question 5, I found that not only were gender and work status needed to use t-tests because they didn't have more than 3 or more groups, but also family, life stage, and industry violated the assumption of homogeneity of variance. And so the Kruskal-Wallis test was performed, and so doing those 3 tests with the sense of virtual community, race and age were found to be have a significance of group differences. So with that, I went and looked. In my paper, I didn't put them in here, but in the paper I looked at the means plots of both age and race, and the means plot of the age showed that the older participants had a higher sense of virtual community and the younger participants had a lower sense of virtual community. And with race, there was a spike with multiracial participants had a much higher sense of virtual community than particularly Black or African American participants. So to kind of discuss that, so my research question one that I had hoped would have, I had hypothesized would have a correlation, did not. However, my thoughts on that were that it indicated a relationship was not found within the specific population that was studied. It does not necessarily indicate that a relationship could or would not be found if a larger or more diverse population were studied. For research question two, looking at the statistically significant predictors, only work status was significant. Based on other research that I looked at in my lit review, these results seem to indicate that the more hours worked per week would lead to more conflict between work-family roles. And when you look at research question three, and age was the statistically significant predictor of sense of virtual community based on the amount that younger people use the internet. I had believed that the older population would have a lower sense of virtual community. But when looking more deeply into the ANOVA data, so work-family status showed a significance in group differences, and results indicated that the lower work-family conflict levels were with participants working part-time, which went right along with my the data or the research that I had already looked at. And in sense of virtual community, the results showed that the older the participant was, had a higher sense of virtual community, and that multi-race participants had a lower sense of virtual community than their Black, white, or Latino counterparts who participated. So, kind of now that all of the data is out there, there obviously wasn't the hypothesis that I had anticipated didn't come to fruition, wasn't seen with the data set, but that brings me to some limitations. So the use of survey for data collection had some significant limitations in my mind. First of all, it was self-reported data. It was possibly inauthentic due to perceived correct answers, although I tried hard to not lead people in any one direction. Volunteerism tends to lead participant bias because people that are interested participate. And the survey that I created was a one complete page instead of multiple sections. So there was a number of people, if you remember, 459 started it and only 266 were used. That means 459 people signed off on the informed consent, which was page one, and then they got to page two, which had my 47 questions, and they didn't finish. So I wonder if maybe if they'd only seen a couple of questions and it had been multiple pages, if that would have made a difference. There's obviously some lack of generalizability of the study due to the homogeneous sample. And I thought it was important to note that the specific time in history when this survey took place over social media. So it was originally posted on the Tuesday before the 2017 presidential inauguration, which was on Friday. The vast majority of people who participated took the test Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. I left it open until February 1st, but there was much fewer, like the bar graph of participation significantly decreased after those first 3 days, and I think social media was kind of taken over by the inauguration and people's thoughts about it. And so just important to note moving forward, when you put your survey out there is important. Although I was approved by IRB in late November and specifically chose to not post it during the month of December, knowing that research says that there's a much higher conflict rate in families typically during the month of December with all the holidays and expectations of happiness. So I chose to wait until January, and so it was a choice. I did not realize that the world would, the Twitter sphere and the Facebook would blow up as much as it did. So my suggestions for future research would be a replicated study with a more diverse participant base. Obviously making some changes to the layout of the survey, but not the survey itself. Also possibly looking at this through a qualitative lens. So I could find virtually no research that had been done looking at the relationship between these two variables. So and in my mind, using a quantitative approach made much more sense for my sensibilities, and also kind of I thought it would be more concrete than the qualitative. But perhaps a case study of an organization or a sector would allow for deeper examination, and all of my results were numerical rather than descriptive. So having a researcher that talked more in depth and had an understanding of people's perceptions and experiences might be useful in another study. Also conducting a replicated study in an existing organization that has a virtual community in place, and then recruiting both users and non-users of that community could be interesting to see, especially as it's used in organizational leadership. That would be a great way, if it was found that there was a correlation, then bringing that to other similar organizations could be useful. And finally, maybe focusing more on the multidimensionality of the work and family conflict scale, and researching the connection between sense of virtual community and the family interfering with work and work interfering with family in a much more targeted way than I did. So that was my presentation, and I look forward to discussing.
Excellent. Thank you so much for hearing background noise now. Thank you so much for sharing that information. I want to go ahead and jump right into the questions. You have two rounds of questions. Margaret, if you would start, that would be awesome. You're muted.
Oh, you're on mute. No.
Yeah.
That's a really easy question to answer.
First of all, excellent job.
Yes.
Your articulation of complex parametrics and non-parametrics related to your study was very impressive. So let me just start by that. So, just congrats on that. I think the second thing is you're being probably too hard on yourself about your response rate. Actually, you got 263. That's great. You had 47 items. The rule of thumb is, 5 people times the items. So you met the threshold for getting enough of a response that you could not only do Cronbach alphas, but potentially do factor analysis. So anyway, so I wouldn't beat yourself up about that. So that's just one thing about that. And I'm not saying you need to do factor analysis, but that is something you meet that threshold, and factor analysis is just another level to revalidate the survey with the population that you have. So, and I just, before I ask my question, so what I understand from your sample, and you didn't have your response, you didn't have a slide on that, but so you had predominantly educated females from the northeastern part of the United States.
Correct.
Okay. And of those educated females, what was the racial background breakup of?
Primarily.
Okay. And the only reason why I'm bringing that up is because race did come up as one of your, findings. And so you just would want to, when you're highlighting that, say something like, give a qualifier, like, well, they're only 16% of the population was non-white, blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
So you just, and so I would, because of that, just not centerpiece that one, just as a general. And I think that, for our discussion today, it was fine reporting out in relation to your research questions, but what I'd love to see you do is craft them in a more of a practitioner way. So for example, the research found that white educated females ages, 30 to 49, who responded to the survey, didn't find. So just, kind of keep whatever that succinct phrase is to describe the majority of your who responded. Just kind of keep re-saying it.
Right.
And try and get it down to like 6 or 7 words of that. So I think the intriguing piece that might be worthwhile you teasing out is this, the age piece, and the social virtual community piece. I'm not surprised, but, in part, again, it may be due to the nature of your population.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going only from my own experience. But if I were to think about my career in my 30s, I didn't have time to check stuff. It was very task-oriented. So belonging to a social group, I was like trying to do my job, trying to do my education, and if I was in a really, so checking in on social media at that stage. So this idea of stages of development, more of a human development piece, might be another way to make sense. And I don't know what your break point was for older, younger. What was your cutoff point? What would you say is younger and what would you say is older?
So 20 to 20, it went by decade, started in the 20, and it went 60 plus was the older.
And what was the statistically significant? What were the two groups that were statistically significant?
So I think the youngest and the oldest were the biggest differences.
So the 20-somethings and
20
the
to
60
29 and 60 plus.
Right. So again, kind of, I would get more precise in that.
Okay.
That the 20-somethings did have a statistically, or whatever, difference than the 60-somethings. And because of that middle group, the 30, 40, 50s, it wasn't statistically different. So
Okay.
the other, and I know these are more comments than they are questions, and again, I think you probably have some neat stuff. At any point, do you have anything where you got your strongest means, like what were the highest mean scores, or your lowest mean scores? Because I think sometimes it's not unusual in social science research when we look at macro concepts like work-family conflict and, the social virtual community, that at that macro conceptual level, there isn't a statistically significant difference. I think it's when you either jump down to the sub-factors or even to the items that can really illuminate some more interesting things. And if you haven't spent some time on that, I think it's worth it. You have some really cool data, and I think all you need to do is kind of do what were my 10 highest means and what were my 10 lowest means, and just literally look at the question and go, wow, what are they really asking here? And then you can make statements like, so it's more of the descriptive statistics. So working female professionals, tended to feel very strong about X, Y, Z. So give me just one quick second. My air conditioning's out, and I think I have a service group here. So I will switch it over. I hate to do.
Okay, thank you so much. Crystal, did you want to go ahead and ask, and for the sake of time, I understand that you have to go. So if you want to ask back-to-back questions, and we'll go out of order just a little bit if that's okay. So I want to make sure you get to ask those questions.
I would appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to start by saying thank you for letting me be a part of this. I love the subject. I love the learning process. And so I love to see students who want to delve into this topic and learn more about it. So I appreciate being able to participate with it. Enjoyed our conversation. Enjoyed my conversation with Brian as well. Wished I lived closer to y'all. So. So I have a couple different comments and thoughts with this. And one of the things that came out, and I think Margaret kind of touched on this, is you ask about age, but I wondered if when you ask about did they have children under the age of 18, did you collect data like how old their children were?
I did, yes.
Because I'm
Well,
wondering.
I asked actually how old their youngest child was. That's what determined their family life stage. And so I asked how many children they had and then how old their youngest was.
Because I think that age does have a factor in it, but I think more than just age, it's the age of children, because that drives so much of the work effort. I am a older mother, so for kind of disclosure, I'm about 50.
I am too, Crystal.
Okay, I'm about 50, and I have a 13-year-old son. But I have a college student as well. So the dynamics that I have at work match somebody's age much younger. So while age is a factor, I think age of children that you're dealing with could be a more significant. And it's so much easy with research. I did the same thing. I thought I anticipated every possible dynamic, well thought out, tried to be strategic, anticipated, read, and then I had these aha moments like, oh my gosh, where did that come from? I didn't see that coming. And so it's a little bit hard afterwards to say, I wish I would have collected that data. Or maybe you do have the data in there. I don't know. So that would be one thing that looking at the future, anticipating, what you're going to do with this, is that could be the driving force as opposed to age. The other thing is, you indicated that work-family conflict and search and a sense of virtual community did not significantly correlate. But I wonder, those are like work-family conflict is typically negatively perceived. Mm-hmm. Is sense of virtual community support, is there resource support that flows between those as opposed to things that draw us? Like, am I making sense? Like, does sense of virtual community help reduce work-family conflict, or does it cause work-family conflict?
Got it.
Any thoughts there?
My original thought had been that it would reduce because you would have a specific place where you could go to and ask questions and not feel as alone as you might feel if you were just dealing with whatever the issue was. But it's interesting. I read that comment in chapter 5 that you sent back, and I hadn't really thought much when I was creating the survey that it could cause it. So that's something.
Most of the domain resources that flow between our work and our volunteerism and our family and our spouses are two-way streets. So they both provide us support and they suck support out of us as well. So so you can look at it as not a one-way direction. So that's and then I didn't see the survey, so I wondered if there were any micro correlations between elements of like border theory and some of your demographics and others. So that I think Margaret kind of touched on, were there other elements that could be brought in? Because sometimes as a whole, it doesn't correlate, but elements within it could, and you have enough to draw from that. Okay, I'm going to keep going, and then you can cut me off whenever. I'm very passionate about this, so I could talk about this forever. When your work status question, what was your specific question? Because that was a correlation with work-family conflict.
It was what, let me pull it up. It was around what,
like, do you work or not? Do you work full-time or part-time?
Yeah, it was part-time, full-time, and non-work. And full-time, 35 hours a week or more, part-time, less than 35 hours a week, temporary work, or unemployed.
Okay.
There was virtually no temporary work, and anybody who was unemployed were removed from the study.
Yeah, it could be the type of work that they do as well. At some jobs, there's a significant separation between work and non-work roles. Other jobs, like higher education, the lines are completely blurred. We take our work home, we answer stuff, and so that could be a factor as well. It's not just a matter of do you work or do you not work, is the blurring of the lines between work and non-work roles through this. And I have one more question, and then I'll pass it along, but feel free to call me at some time and we'll talk some more about this. I'm wondering if when your demographic you found were, I think, making over 100,000 women between 30 and, let me flip back to that page.
I think it was 30 and
49. So here's just having younger kids and younger emerging adults, is Facebook, you got that because of the means in which you rolled that out. My adult daughter, who was still young, college student, doesn't use Facebook other than to communicate to her mother. So is that, like, had you rolled it out in Tumblr or some other social media that's valued by a younger demographic, could that have made a difference in it?
Yeah. I'm sure.
You picked those two, which,
right.
Facebook it's like the foundation of social media. But I just wondered, did you anticipate, or did you?
I think I probably would have gotten a younger population, maybe if I had even posted a picture on Instagram with the link, or Snapchat.
Yep.
And that shows my own age because I don't use any of those things. So
yeah.
Maybe that's why I got a population that looks more like me than a population that was younger. But that's an interesting conversation to push for next time.
Overall, very good job. I do think that there are several things that influence our work-family conflict. I think some things reduce it, and I think some feed into it. And really and timing could be. If I were to fill out this survey this week, I have huge work-family conflict because work is so demanding right now, and so my family is suffering. But that could be different if it's a snapshot. It was a snapshot element, and so looking at it from a different time point would be good. I loved reading your study.
Thank you.
Want to hear more about it later, so thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Crystal, for sharing that input. Margaret, did you have another question or a couple ideas or comments that you want to make? And for the sake of time, I want to make sure that we're good for.
Again, I think probably this is more of a conversation. And I think Crystal, it's nice to hear you echo the sentiment about this family life stage, because I think that's a newer piece Sasha added in. earlier on, and part of it was both Brian and I, by the way, have 2 generations of kids ourselves. So as a 52-year-old, I have 2nd and 3rd graders, and then 3 college students. So
Yes.
I have even a bigger disparity of that. And so, you know, again, I think that might be the one, you know, and this again is what might be worthwhile. So the core of your survey only had, taking out the demographics, 37 items, right?
Yes.
So I think if you created a chart where you've got those 37 items and then a table and then just went through each of your demographics. So the first one, let's just say it's age. And then put in those mean scores and use a descriptive table. And you can kind of eye them across and go, wow, the 20-somethings all, you know, whatever. And you can look at some general trends and highlight some of those because, you know, and again, you might find some blurring of stuff. And then do it again with the family life stage. You know, go through, you know, a couple of the these key factors that are beyond just gender. I mean, you can do them with gender too. Because again, I think at the macro level, it wasn't significant. And I think dropping down to the item level and then just replicating that 10 times by each of the different subsections of each of your factors are going to really help bring forward some insights to help inform you in your practice, but also, you know, I think future research too around that. So I guess that's just more of a comment than it really is a question. So, but I guess this will be my, other than the, you know, the surprise piece of it. You know, in the timing again, of course, it's an obvious one, but January is probably good. Because in a way, there's a, you know, in research, we want to go where we think we're going to find the phenomenon. December was probably peak, but I tell you, January is when the bills come in. And January is election time, you know, and so I think it was great. But again, for future research, to Crystal's point, future researchers might consider, you know, capturing it twice, you know, points of time. That could be a suggestion for somebody in the future. Looking at the group that you most assimilate yourself with, was there anything when you're going through the data that you were like, yeah, that's me, or gosh, that's not where I saw myself? Do you recall that process when you're looking through the item responses?
Yeah, I felt more personally that my online community, specifically like my parent communities that I belong to, which is what most people said that they were a part of. It was Facebook or online communities that were parent-based instead of work-based. I felt like I have a stronger sense of virtual community, I think, than most of the people that I surveyed, which I guess is why I thought there would be a correlation. And so I was surprised when they were answering the question and their sense of virtual community was much lower.
And I think that this comes back to, you know, your positionality, you know, really where we started, you know, and even during your proposal when we were talking about this. I think you had an assumption about this strong connection.
Right.
And that's okay. That's where your curiosity, you know, comes from. And, you know, it just could be, again, the nature of who it is who responded at the time that you responded. You know, again, for me, I wouldn't be as critical about how it is you got it out there, because for working adults, Facebook and Nextdoor is what, you know, working female professionals are using that. I might add in, you know, LinkedIn. I think the other social media applications Crystal was bringing up are more what our kids might be using. They're using WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger. So I wouldn't worry that you didn't get that group. I think that's a differentiation of the social media platforms. But I feel like you use an effective way to get at the audience you were looking for. I'm not aware of many female professionals that are using some of the other ones. There are some newer things trending. But, so, anyways, Crystal, back to you, sorry.